tasty. We'll find out how tasty soon.
Quake Champions. It's Quake, but with champions. Like from League of Legends. They've got ultimates and passives and shit. I can only ask, why? I played this game last year during a beta test. It was quite a bit rougher back then, particularly on the interface side, but the core gameplay was the same. It was like Quake, but with champions, who have ultimates and passives and shit. Why? Quake Champions is an entry in the worrying modern trend of shooter games that cannot decide whether they want to be hero shooters or just shooters. It follows in the footsteps of the likes of Dirty Bomb and Lawbreakers. I didn't think this was going to be a trend before, but Quake Champions is the third game in the recent years that feels like it suffers from this identity crisis, so clearly there is something going on. Anyway, Quake Champions, much like Lawbreakers, has a solid shooter gameplay core that could easily stand on its own. In fact, it feels like it was made to stand on its own. And then midway through production, the market research team went like, oh hey, this Overwatch game is selling really well, so we need to get in on that. So the developers tacked on a bunch of abilities and heroes that really have no business being there. I mean, maybe it didn't happen like that. Maybe they did design the heroes in from the beginning and just did a bad job of it. Either way, the end result is a game that's trying to be a hero shooter and it's failing. And because it's got the heroes in it, it can't really be a regular shooter anymore either. Basically, what I'm saying is that Quake Champions would be a much better game if it didn't have the champions in it. But then it would just be Quake, and that's already been tried and it didn't sell. Then I tried it again, and again, and again, and it still didn't sell. The market just wasn't there for traditional arena shooters. I've only really got one real point I want to make about this game. To preface it, we need to take a quick look at the champions in Quake Champions. What's good and what's bad about the design. Mechanically, Quake's champions differ from one another in three aspects. Most obvious is the unique active ability. Every hero has a different one. The basic guy, Ranger, throws out an orb that deals some damage and can reactivate his ability to teleport to it. Teleporting inside of people kills them instantly. Other heroes have different abilities. These range from rather boring ones that just shoot a bunch of hurt, to abilities like a wall hack, a self-heal, and an invisibility that also makes you invulnerable to damage and lets you telefrag people when it ends. If you think that sounds kind of frustrating, you are exactly right. These abilities are a low-hanging fruit for criticism, so I won't go into too much detail on them. I mean, to be fair, they aren't good. They feel out of place and almost universally frustrating and cheap to be on the receiving end of. But if I went into detail on how each and every ability works and what makes them annoying, this video would be really long, and I don't like editing. Also, I can't actually play most of the heroes because of the free-to-play unlock model, so there is that. The second difference is in the base stats. Champions in Quake Champions are divided into three very original categories. Light, medium, and, you guessed it, heavy. Light characters move slightly faster than heavy ones, while heavy characters are tankier than light ones, and medium characters sit somewhere in between. At least, that's how it works in theory. This could just be because I'm bad at Quake, but heavy champions feel way too powerful. There are two reasons for this. One, the base movement speed only really affects your running speed and is largely irrelevant when strafe jumping. And two, base armor. You see, unlike in traditional Quake, in Quake Champions, the champions spawn with some amount of armor in addition to having varying amounts of maximum armor. Heavy champions spawn with 100 base armor and can raise this up to 150 just by picking up armor shards. When they spawn in, they will already have as much armor as a light character has when they pick up the so-called heavy armor power-up. That's red armor for you Quake dads. This all translates to heavy champions being able to take a ton of hits compared to light and medium ones, with the only drawbacks being a slightly larger hitbox and a virtually irrelevant run speed reduction. On top of that, they have to worry much less about power-ups, since they're basically powered up the moment they spawn in. The third difference are the passive abilities. Now, this I actually like. For the most part, the passive abilities affect movement. Movement has always been very important to Quake, and I think differentiating characters by their movement styles is the single stroke of genius to be found in this game's design. The basic movement is the classic Quake strafe jumping and rocket jumping, but different champions add their own spice into the mix. One guy has uncapped movement speed, and yes, unfortunately everyone else has capped movement speed. Then there is crouch sliding, wall jumping, CPMA style air control, double jumping, dealing damage based on movement speed when colliding with enemies, and so forth. In a game where movement has as big of a role as in Quake, making it a part of a champion's identity is a great idea. The way they've done it is really solid too, with the movement quirks being skill based and very fundamental. They don't feel like gimmicks in the same way something like wall climbing does in Overwatch. They expand on the core movement system, adding flair to the champions without giving them an unfair advantage over other characters, because ultimately, every jump in the game can also be done by either strafe jumping or rocket jumping. All things considered, however, as they are, the champions in Quake Champions are detrimental to the game. They make the game feel unfair and frustrating. Dueling a guy and being about to win only for them to turn invisible and then insta-gib you is incredibly fucking infuriating. In the same vein, dueling a guy and then losing because their character has more health and armor than yours feels unfair. I think it's a shame because I think they could have made the champions gimmick work out if they just stuck to defining their identity mainly through movement styles and minimized the amount of frustrating unfair mechanics. Of course, this wouldn't allow for the kind of a large, ever-expanding MOBA-like roster hero shooters aspire to have. There is only so many different styles of movement to be explored before you end up having to rehash existing mechanics. It feels like Quake Champions is going for this kind of an ever-growing roster too, and I don't think it's going to do the game any favors. So here's what I think would have made Quake Champions an actually truly good game. Cut out the MOBA-like massive roster bullshit. Launch with 5 characters. None of them have active abilities and they all have the same base stats. Keep in the best unique movement quirks. Now you've got old Quake, but it's spiced up because every character moves and therefore plays differently. Would this be enough to make people want to play Quake again? I don't know, probably not, but at least the game would have been true to its identity. I mean, somehow I don't think people want to play the current incarnation of Quake Champions either. Or if you want to go the hero shooter route, do it properly. Quake Champions is literally just Quake, but with champions. These two elements really don't mix well, or they haven't been mixed well. The maps are the old classic Quake maps, designed for a classic Quake and not a hero shooter. More crucially, the champions in Quake Champions don't have enough personality for a character-driven game. Overwatch's gameplay isn't what makes it so popular, though it does help. It's the heroes, with their appealing design, funny and quirky personalities, and unique identity both in terms of gameplay and characterization that draws people to Overwatch. The champions in Quake Champions lack almost all of that, and their gameplay isn't enough to justify their existence. I wanted to like Quake Champions, just like I want to like Quake, like I liked it all those years ago. Unfortunately, the classic arena shooter gameplay just can't keep me interested for hours on end anymore, and going by the low popularity of the genre, I don't think I'm the only one. I really hoped they could somehow spice arena shooters up with this one, but I'm afraid it just didn't really work out. Maybe it's a lack of bravery and will to innovate, or maybe they just didn't really know what makes hero shooters tick, but Quake Champions just doesn't do it for me.